Me and my brother Phil Parsons and Gary McCormick, and we were going to, I believe it was the Washington Inn at the time. And there were two girls standing on the side of the road. It appeared to me that they had like tie-dyed shirts on. I just drove by and my brother said, man, those girls look like they got blood on them.
These words, spoken in the quiet darkness of a late summer night, set off a chain of events that no one could have ever predicted. It was just after 11:30 p.m. on August 19, 1975. Victor, Phil, and Gary were driving down US 40 in Hancock County, Indiana, for drinks and a simple night out with friends. But destiny had other plans. As soon as Victor heard the words, he slammed on the brakes of his 1968 Cutlass Supreme and quickly pulled over by the National Outdoor Drive-In. The two girls rushed toward the car, their faces filled with terror. Introducing themselves as Kathy Rottler and Candace Smith, they urgently pleaded for help. What the three men saw before them horrified them. It was like something out of a nightmare. The girls were soaked in blood with pieces of what looked like flesh and skin hanging from their necks. Kathy and Candace climbed into the back seat and Victor sped off, urgently searching for a phone booth to call for help. He finally stopped at Motel 8, which was about 2 miles from the cornfields. As soon as they stopped, Gary jumped out of the car, ran into the motel, and told the night manager to call 911. Officer Gary Maxey and Jerry Priest, Cumberland Town Marshal, quickly arrived at the motel with their team. They were shocked by the girls' terrible injuries.
Got a call about an injured woman. So I zoomed out there and I said, well, what's going on, And I raised my light and looked in, and she lifted up her neck. I'll tell you what it looked like. It looked like an accordion.
Oblivious to her own injuries, Kathy was only focused on finding her little sister Sherry, who was still at the cornfield. She was scared and begged the detective to find her.
If it was the last thing I did while I was on this earth, it would be to have somebody find Sherry. I wanted her found. I wanted her home. I wanted her to be okay.
While Jerry Priest and Phil Parsons stayed back to provide first aid to Kathy and Candace and take them to the hospital, Officer Maxey rushed to the cornfield with another detective to search for Sherry. Victor and Gary followed to help.
I just grabbed this guy and took him. I said, you're going to take me back there. We're going there. He showed me the location in front of the drive-in, and then we turned into a side road. We're driving, and we went back about, I'd say, a quarter mile. I turned my spotlight towards the west, and then all of a sudden, it was just like, boom, here it was. As perfect as you could see is 2 long tire marks. I said, look at here, and I think this is the place.
As soon as they stopped, Officer Maxey jumped out of the car. He knew time was of the essence because Sherry was severely injured and could be bleeding out.
The police officer told me to stay at the car, and when Gary walked down the lane with the flashlight, calling the young lady's name.
And we're flying down through the rows, going like 20, 30, 40, 50 feet in this row, turn and come back, and we're yelling out, if you can hear us, say anything, do anything. If you can't talk, make a noise. And then we stopped. And I told the guy, just stop. Don't do nothing, just stop. And then we heard her moan. And I think she gave it all she got. And once she did, I was able to lock on to where she was at. There I saw her body laying there, in between the corn rows. The adrenaline is pumping so much that I just grabbed her completely up. She didn't weigh nothing. I just laid her across the back end of my police car. See that she's breathing, but she wasn't really moving that much. She just laid there.
By the time Officer Maxey found Sherry, more detectives were already at the scene. An ambulance also arrived and took Sherry to Community Hospital East in Indianapolis. They had already taken Candace and Kathy there.
I remember talking to God, praying to God, please help find my sister. And then I did hear that they had found her. Felt like a ton off my shoulders. I had a feeling that she was going to be okay too.
As soon as Sherry arrived at the hospital, she was taken to the operating room. Doctors needed to close and repair the severe injuries and open wounds she had sustained from the stabbings and assault. They found 17 stab wounds on her upper chest alone. 3 cuts were also found on her throat. Later on, the detectives learned that the man had stabbed Sherry multiple times until she fell unconscious.
He sat me down on the ground, and he got in his pocket, and he got his pocket knife out, and he started stabbing me in the neck, and I passed out. I don't know what happened, but he come back and he put his hand on my heart, and I immediately opened my eyes because that's what natural reaction is, I reckon. And then he just started stabbing me in the chest. And he stabbed me 17 times in the chest. And I passed out again.
While Sherry remained in critical condition, Candace's and Kathy's injuries, although less severe, were still serious. Both girls had suffered stab wounds to their throats and required emergency surgeries.
I had stitches in my arm. I had to get stitches across my chin. I had the 12 cuts to my throat, probably about 300 stitches.
After I was in there for about a week, Sherry was moved to my room. I think we were up there 10, 12 days. I could have gone home earlier, but I stayed so she wouldn't be at the hospital all by herself.
But who were these girls? And how did they end up so brutally stabbed and soaked in blood? What really happened? To answer these questions, we need to go back to the beginning of what should have been an ordinary summer night. For 14-year-old Kathy Rottler, the final days of summer vacation were precious. School would start soon, and she wanted to make the most of her remaining freedom. So, when a family friend invited her to learn how to play pool at the barn, the popular local hangout, she jumped at the chance. It was the perfect way to enjoy an evening with friends. She just needed her dad's permission. When she asked, he agreed, but with one condition: she had to take her 11-year-old sister Sherry along. Though a little reluctant, Kathy accepted, not wanting to miss out on a fun evening. Kathy's best friend, Candace Smith, also joined them. By the time the 3 girls left the house, the sun had set. It was dark, but none of them felt nervous about walking at night. Back then, Kathy's biggest worry was getting grounded for not doing her chores. The night was clear and warm, ideal for a leisurely stroll. The girls walked south toward East Washington Street, also known as US 40, and made a quick stop at a gas station to buy cigarettes. As they left the gas station, Kathy suggested they hitchhike to the barn. Candace and Sherry were hesitant. The barn was less than a mile away, only a 15-minute walk. But Kathy, having hitchhiked before, convinced them to try it. In the 70s, hitchhiking wasn't unusual. Though not necessarily considered the safest option, it didn't raise the same alarm bells it does today. The girls crossed the street to position themselves on the side where cars were heading towards the barn, and Kathy stuck out her thumb. Almost instantly, a man driving a light-colored station wagon pulled over next to them. One of the girls pulled open the rear passenger door, but the back seat was folded down, leaving no space to sit. The driver signaled for them to sit in the front with him. Kathy climbed in first, followed by Sherry, and then Candace. They told the man to drive them to the barn. He nodded in agreement and pulled away from the pavement, heading east on Washington Street. As they approached the turn for the barn, Kathy pointed it out, but the man continued driving as if he hadn't heard her. He sped past the intersection, his foot firmly on the accelerator. Sensing something was wrong, the girls began to panic.
Tried to hit the gas pedal and I couldn't reach it, so I grabbed the steering wheel. Told him I was just going to cause me a wreck. But at that point, he pulled a gun out and put it to my temple and told me to shut up and scoot over, he's going to blow my head off.
Terrified, Kathy yelled at Candace and Sherry to open the door or window and jump out.
And they were trying to get me to understand that there was no door handle, no window handle.
The whole family was off the passenger door. It's just screws and bolts. There wasn't no way out. And I thought if I jumped over the back seat, I might be able to get out one of the back doors, but at the same time, he'd already pulled a gun, so I was thinking I'd probably get shot on my way over the seat.
I was scared to death. I didn't know about jumping out of the car, and I knew that it wasn't right. I just didn't know what to do.
Trapped and helpless, the girls knew there was no escape. The man drove on, heading east on US 40 for over 5 miles, leaving the city of Indianapolis behind and entering the rural landscape of Hancock County. Just past County Road 700 West, he made a U-turn and turned right. Then he went off-road and turned left onto a narrow dirt path hidden by tall rows of corn stalks.
He goes down a little ways to where his car can't be seen from the road. And he shuts his car off.
He reached behind in the back seat, got some rope.
He ties our hands up with the rope. And then he gets out of the car and he walks around to the passenger door.
And he got out a pocket knife. He asked us our names and our ages. And I said, I'm Kathy, I'm 14. This is Candy, she's 13. And that's Sherry, she's 11. And he said, well, Sherry, you're first. You're the youngest, you're first. Before he took Sherry out of the car, I whispered into her ear that he's got a gun. Do whatever he says so that he won't kill you. I didn't want nothing to happen to her. And that was my main concern.
Once he got me out of the car, he took me around to the front of the car. I was raped. He put me on the ground and he stabbed me. I remember the knife coming down into my throat, and I passed out.
I just couldn't watch it.
That was pretty hard. That was hard to watch. I felt real helpless.
I was so freaked out. I was just worried about my sister. We just had to sit there. I mean, there was nothing we could do. We were just stuck in this position that I had put us in. Felt like we're all gonna die.
Desperate to defend themselves, Kathy and Candace searched inside the car for something that could be used as a weapon, a gun, a knife, anything. Kathy realized the rope around her right hand was loose. Maybe she could break free. But then what? They were trapped in a cornfield and the man was armed. And most importantly, she couldn't leave behind her little sister, Sherry. The man reappeared after a few minutes. He flung open the passenger door and forcefully struck Candace on the side of her face with his gun.
Get out of the car. Do I have any money in my pocket? And I said, yeah. Looked in my pockets. He said, you're lying. Lay down in front of the right tire, the front of the car. And I laid down and he just started stabbing me in my neck. And stabbed me like 12 times. Then after he got done stabbing me, I just held my breath. Act like I was dead. I just laid real still. And he picked me up by my hair only and dragged me into the cornfield and dropped me.
Then he came back for Kathy. He untied her and led her out of the station wagon.
Well, he got me out, and I started to proceed to the front because that's where the other two had gone. So when I sat down, I looked up at him. I said, now what? And that's when he started stabbing me. And he stabbed me, I think, 5 times in the neck. And then he walked back. I watched him walk up to the front. I seen him stabbing both of them more. And then when he came back to me, he picked me up by my feet and just tossed me in the cornfield.
Kathy remained motionless. She heard a car door open, then slam shut. An engine roared to life. Weakened by blood loss, Kathy forced herself to stand and tried to see where he was going. As she watched him pause at a stop sign, a hand suddenly grabbed her leg. Terrified, Kathy fell back into the dirt. Then she realized the hand belonged to Candace, who was lying beside her in the dirt.
I asked Candy where Sherry was, and she thought he had taken her with her.
We looked for her, but we couldn't find her.
It was clear they needed to get help. With effort, Kathy and Candace got to their feet and began a slow and painful journey toward the highway. That's when Victor Parsons and his companions spotted the 2 girls on the side of the highway and drove them to Motel 8 to call for help. The girls' survival instinct that night kept them alive against unimaginable odds. But it was just the beginning of a long road to recovery. They had endured horrors that would change their lives forever. As the girls slowly recovered, law enforcement agencies from across the state joined forces to track down the attacker and his vehicle. The Marion County Sheriff's Office alone dedicated 12 detectives to the investigation, collaborating with the Hancock County Sheriff's Office, Indiana State Police, and the Cumberland Town Marshal. The detectives meticulously searched the cornfield looking for evidence. They found a rope, a handkerchief, and cigarette butts. The clothes the girls had been wearing that night were also entered into evidence. When the girls felt better, they were asked to describe the attacker and his station wagon. They recalled his wrinkled face, his pink and white striped shirt, and his brown work pants. He had a gold pulsar watch on his left wrist. He was clean-shaven, and his short, wavy, reddish-brown hair was streaked with gray and curled at the ends. To the girls, he seemed between 40 and 45 years old, much like their parents, and didn't appear threatening at all. They estimated he weighed about 170 pounds. The station wagon, they recalled, was either white or light blue and had 4 doors. It might have been a 1967 to 1969 Chrysler product, probably a Dodge. They remembered noticing rust around the fender wells and that the interior was dark. The car had no radio, but it did have a glove box in the center of the dash. They also noted that it had an automatic transmission. When authorities released a description and a sketch of the suspect and his station wagon based on the girls' memories, the tips flooded in. Strangers reported strangers, neighbors reported neighbors, and unhappy wives reported their husbands. One tip sent the detectives to check out a man sleeping on fresh graves in Washington Park Cemetery. Another tip led them across state lines into Ohio, where a man was pulled over and agreed to a search of his station wagon. At one point, the detectives even considered the possibility that the attacker could be a notorious child molester who had been preying on young girls in the area for 2 years. Within 4 months of the attack, the detectives had followed hundreds of leads across Indiana and neighboring states. All 3 girls went through numerous photo albums of suspects in station wagons, and they attended several lineups. Additionally, they underwent polygraph tests and hypnosis to ensure every minor detail was covered. Despite these exhaustive efforts, no one was positively identified, no arrests were made, and the real attacker remained at large. Then, a glimmer of hope emerged in November 1975. A man arrested for shoplifting in Shelbyville, Indiana, caught the eye of the detectives. He looked like the sketch of the girls' attacker, owned a similar car, and had been released from jail just 3 days before the girls were attacked. The man was identified as William J. Williams. His wife told the detectives some strange details about him. She told them that her husband came home one night wearing a pink and white striped shirt with a tear and stains that looked like blood. He then asked her to burn it, raising her suspicions. A knife was also missing from their kitchen. Moreover, she mentioned that their clothesline had been recently replaced, and the old one sounded similar to the rope used on the girls. Williams also had a car fitting the description of the station wagon, and coincidentally, it also had a missing door handle. Later, when the detectives searched his station wagon, they discovered that the door handle had been repaired. However, the knife and clothesline were still unaccounted for. The detectives brought Williams in for a lineup. Kathy and Candace both identified him as the attacker, but Sherry wasn't sure.
It was kind of scary. I didn't like looking at him. It made me nervous.
The guy from Shelbyville, yeah, I picked him out. I recognized him, and I just felt like it was him.
He had a lot of resemblance of what the man looked like.
Despite this, the detectives believed there was enough evidence to arrest him and charge him with 3 counts of kidnapping and attempted murder. But unfortunately, they had made a crucial mistake.
Before the lineup, the girls were shown the suspect's mugshot. It's just too suggestive. They picked him out because that's the guy whose photo you showed them. You told them that was the guy. And if they were to swear on a stack of Bibles, the courts would say, nope, the officer made a major error and courts would not have taken the case.
With the lineup a bust, the case quickly unraveled. There was no physical evidence to put him at the crime scene. The wife also could not testify in court because of spousal privilege under Indiana law. As a result, the prosecutors were forced to drop the charges against Williams.
The police came out to my parents' house. They said they didn't have enough evidence to prove it was the guy, and they let him go, and they left.
I never understood that, but I was just a kid, so I really didn't understand what they need for evidence. And I didn't stop thinking it was probably him.
I really thought it was him. So I was let down when they told me they let him go.
As the months turned into years with no new leads, the case went cold, leaving the 3 girls with little hope of ever getting justice. In the aftermath of the incident, The lives of Kathy, Candace, and Sherry were forever changed. While the world around them moved on, the girls struggled to heal from the physical and emotional scars.
A reporter printed our names in the paper, and I didn't think that was right. Some people felt sorry for us, and they would be like, we wish this didn't happen to you, and all that. And then there's other people's like, well, you shouldn't have been out that late at night. You know, if you weren't hitchhiking, it wouldn't have happened.
I had had surgery again. I had a tube and it was draining the infection. There was a classmate and he said, hey, Rottler, are you Mrs. Frankenstein? And I threw my lunch tray at him and I left. Not everybody was like that, but there were some people that were pretty cold-hearted. I ended up quitting school shortly after that. I couldn't do it. I had so much anxiety. I said, that's it.
School became a nightmare. They faced cruel taunts and insensitive questions from classmates. The emotional pain was even deeper. They lost their innocence and sense of security. Candace was diagnosed with PTSD and suffered from nightmares. Kathy had to relearn how to speak, while Sherry withdrew into herself and had repeated nightmares about the incident. The trauma continued to haunt them well into adulthood, leading to struggles with alcohol and drugs. Relationships became a challenge, as the emotional scars from the attack made it difficult to trust and connect with others. Then, in 1990, 15 years after the attack, a ray of hope emerged. The women were contacted by Sergeant Stephen Gibbs of the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Their case had been reopened. Ohio authorities had alerted the Sheriff's Office about a potential lead in a series of similar cases in Ohio and eastern Indiana, and Gibbs volunteered to take another look at the 1975 cold case and see if the same person was responsible. After going through the existing evidence, Gibbs discovered that the physical evidence had not been processed. So he organized and processed the evidence to build out the case file. However, DNA technology was still in its infancy in the 90s, and Detective Gibbs was unable to develop any new leads. Despite keeping the case file on his desk for months and revisiting the investigation in 2003, Gibbs struggled to make significant progress before retiring in 2008. He felt he had reached a dead end. He regretted reopening the case, feeling he had disrupted the women's lives without delivering justice. The failure haunted him for years. While Gibbs was not aware at the time, his work had laid the groundwork for a future breakthrough. Even though the case went cold again, Kathy refused to give up. She was determined to find the culprit who had shattered their lives. In 2018, Kathy's persistence led her to Detective Sergeant David Ellison, head of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Cold Case Homicide Unit. Ellison, a veteran detective with over 3 decades of experience, led a small team dedicated to solving these long-standing mysteries. When Kathy met Ellison, she handed him a worn file folder containing the old police records. He listened intently as she recounted the horrific details of the attack. Although Kathy's case didn't technically fall under his unit's jurisdiction, Ellison was moved by her story and promised to do what he could. He knew the chances of finding new evidence were slim, but he was determined to try. Ellison made copies of Kathy's records and told her to check back in a month. He then started his investigation, gathering the old case file and evidence to see what could be done. The task wasn't easy. The case was very old, and many police departments had already looked into it. Some offices had moved or changed over the years, and Ellison worried that some records might be lost or damaged. Luckily, he found the work of Stephen Gibbs. Gibbs had carefully organized all the old records and interviews. Ellison also found the physical evidence, safely stored at the Hancock County Sheriff's Office. This evidence included bloodstains, rope, a knife, a cigarette butt, the girl's clothes, and samples taken from Sherry during her medical exam. Ellison hoped the DNA tests would give him a new lead and finally bring justice to Kathy, Candace, and Sherry. Finally, in late 2021, there was a breakthrough. The lab had successfully extracted enough DNA to create a full profile of the suspect.
Then later, we were notified by the Marion County Forensic Services Agency that one of the items had produced a DNA profile of an unknown male. That was in 2021. Additionally, we had submitted more items, 2 more items revealed DNA from an unknown male profile. All three of those male profiles matched each other, and one of the items had Sherry Rottler's DNA on it. It was at that point that we knew we had our suspect's DNA.
Unfortunately, it didn't match anyone in the national DNA database.
After our profile got put into CODIS, we weren't getting any results which we had hoped for. That tells us two things. Either our person didn't do anything else ever, or he's deceased, or he was locked up before the CODIS program started. So his DNA was never taken.
The detectives also tracked down the original suspect's, William J. Williams' family, and tested their DNA. Ultimately, he was cleared of any involvement in the attack. By 2022, 4 years had passed with little progress. Yet Ellison refused to give up. Determined to find answers, Ellison turned to a new approach: forensic genetic genealogy. This method combines DNA analysis with family tree research to identify suspects in cold cases. In January 2023, IMPD partnered with DNA Labs International, a private forensic lab specializing in DNA analysis. The lab's team extracted the suspect's DNA from the evidence, made millions of copies, and sequenced it. They then uploaded the profile to genealogy databases and started searching for matches.
Both of these individuals were very cooperative. They identified their father and provided DNA samples for comparison. As a result of that testing by DNA Labs International this past December, they were able to confirm the match between the suspect DNA and the daughter and the son.
The man's name was Thomas Edward Williams. He was born in Indianapolis on May 21, 1934. Williams worked as a mechanic and had a long criminal record. In 1966, 9 years before he hurt the girls, he was arrested in Phoenix, Arizona, for robbing a bank at gunpoint. He pleaded guilty to robbery and served about 5 years in federal prison, getting parole in 1971. Williams returned to Indianapolis in 1975, the year of the girls' attack. The 41-year-old lived just 4 miles from Kathy's and Sherry's childhood home. He stayed there till the end of 1976, after which he moved. In 1977, Williams turned up in Texas, where he was caught and convicted a second time for a series of robberies. He died of natural causes in prison in Galveston, Texas, on November 13, 1983, at the age of 49. He was buried in the Captain Joe Bird Cemetery, a prison cemetery in Huntsville, Texas. The detectives then showed the women a photo of Williams on a cell phone, placing it beside the composite sketches created in 1975 and 1976 based on their descriptions. They also presented Williams's mugshots from Texas. Finally, after all these years, the detectives had found the right man. In the weeks and months after learning the truth, they felt a mix of emotions. Candace felt a sense of peace and justice for her family members who had passed away.
It's closure for me. I'm Candace. It's put peace within my heart, and it also gave justice to my parents and the brother that's passed as well. And I'm a survivor. Thank you.
Sherry decided to forgive the attacker, more so for her peace of mind than anything else.
To say I'm Sherry. I'm very thankful to everyone for your help. But I also want to indicate that I do forgive this man. I had to in order to continue to live my life. So I hope that anybody who's in this situation can please do the same, because that's what God wants you to do. I forgive you. What was his name again? I'm not going to say his name again. Okay. Well, I forgive the man, and I thank the children. Thomas Edward Williams, you are forgiven. I'm sorry if that makes anybody mad, but that's in my heart.
Kathy, who had worked so hard to find the attacker, was relieved and grateful to finally get justice.
I stand here before you today as a survivor who has learned the true meaning of patience. I've learned that sometimes the answer you are waiting for can take decades to get, nearly 5 decades in fact. But I feel it's all in God's time, and it was well worth the wait. There were times over the past 48 years that I felt no one was working on this case. But I kept hoping and praying, and I'm so glad that I kept my faith in myself. I'm so glad I kept faith in myself and investigators. My messages to other survivors out there is never give up and continue to fight to keep your case open. This is a day I never thought would come, but I told myself to keep going and never to stop searching for answers. Today we got our answers, and I'm so thankful for that. I'd like to turn...
While the scars of the past remain, the women can now begin to heal, knowing their attacker will never harm anyone again.
I didn't think I'd ever stand here on this corner with you two, talking about it.
I didn't either.
Since it's been solved.
We can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can do this.
Yes,
Yeah,
we can.
right.
We can, we are.
Right.
And I love y'all.
I love you
too. I can't believe we're here. What's next?
Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Lots of love. I don't know other than that. Thank you, Kathy, for never giving up.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy, for never giving up.
What do you think about today's case? Do you believe justice was served, or is there more to the story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more deep dives into true crime cases, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you found this case as fascinating as we did, give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.